Thanks very much, everybody. So there was some great questions came up in the chat when Norah was speaking to us. But again, if the rapporteur could add to the chat any points or comments that you have that you'd like me to raise with Dr. McRae, that would be brilliant. But I suppose, Norah, if you don't mind, just to kick it off, a comment that came in from Geraldine O'Neill when you were speaking is in relation to any feedback that there's been. Whoa, the comments are flying in. I lost the top one. Sorry, Norah, if there's been any feedback across Canada or internationally on the value of having an agreed set of will types, and if so, what has that feedback been?
So with respect to the question, the feedback has been, we started this process, and as you can imagine, any of you, maybe none of you have had this experience of being in a higher education committee that goes on for about 2 years discussing the meanings of this and that. But maybe this is a uniquely Canadian thing, but anyhow, we started this process in the province of British Columbia, which is on the west coast of Canada, and we figured out the types there. And then we took it across to the rest of Canada, and there was a lot of, arguing about this and that, but at the end of the day, we basically came up with the same sorts of buckets, as we call them. So we call them buckets so that people don't feel too constrained within each type. And then that's been very, very useful to us across the country, because now we feed that into, we have a very strong relationship with our federal government that has been extremely supportive in supporting work integrated learning with incentive programs to employers, which have been really important during COVID to help keep employers hiring. And it's been very important to lay the foundation for all sorts of things that we do across the country now. So I would say it's been extremely positive. We have taken this framework to, and I'm not sure, I thought I would mention actually to this group, there's the World Association, WACE, W-A-C-E, the World Association of Cooperative and Work Integrated Education. And that association has international gatherings, and there's a large contingent, especially I would say from Australia, that are very interested in assessment. And some of you may want to connect in. I'm now part of the group that's running that association. We're planning a virtual conference in May, and there's always interest in assessment and quality and how we move forward. So the Australian group, for example, and I see Rola is here from Deakin, so you're probably very aware of this. Also came up with a quality framework, and also have been looking at different innovative types of will and how that connects in. And so we've taken the Australian work and we've seen, okay, how do these innovative models, how are they different? Should we be rethinking our approach, our framework, and actually find that the innovative models fit within our buckets already? And so that's a really good check. So I would say it's been something that's really enabled conversations across many jurisdictions, and really, really helps to bring sense to the conversation. Or else my experience is that you can spend, the first 90% of the conversation arguing about what you're talking about instead of actually getting down to what it is you need to talk about.
Great, thanks, Norah. So some interesting questions coming in, but I suppose Catherine Murphy, you raise a very interesting one about training for the workplace assessors. Would you like to ask Norah a little bit about that, Catherine? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I would be interested in hearing what expertise or what's best practice they have developed. I think it's probably opened up a little bit more in terms of how we think about training workplace supervisors, as we call them now, given that we're doing so much more online. But I'd be interested to hear what Norah has come up with already.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to check my understanding. By workplace supervisors, it would be the actual employer in the place of business or the host organization.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And I would say this is an area that always needs improvement because, as you know, there's so many different kinds of them and they come from such different backgrounds, and we don't have the same level of jurisdiction over them that you would over your own staff or your own faculty, right? So what we do is a very kind of soft approach. Here's a supervisor's handbook. Here's what we're trying to accomplish with assessment. Here are different ways that you might do it. Here are the guidelines around fairness and accountability, that kind of thing. This is, and also an explanation of what we're going to do with the assessments. In the case of the University of Waterloo, this is very important because the evaluation an employer gives a student shows up on their record. So if an employer gives a student a very good, then the next time they're applying for a job, the very good shows up on their record, and the next employer gets to see it. So there's a big impact. If that employer, decides that the student has done poorly, that is really has a huge impact on the student. So we want to make sure that, to the extent we can, but with those provisions, Catherine, that we can't necessarily control what they're going to do because they are independent operators, which makes work integrated learning, tricky in that regard. So we do have checks and balances. If an employer, say or a host organization decides they don't like a student for a particular reason, then we have a way of moderating that evaluation or coming in and making sure that that is not the end of the story, that we have a process to protect the student effectively. And especially if there could be any allegation that there's something that's not equitable, or there's something that relates to racism or sexism or anything like that, we want to make sure that the student's protected. And that's number one.
Great, Norah, thank you. So look, I'm very conscious of time, but I'm going to ask one more question, which I think sums up what a lot of the groups were asking, and it's from Mandy in room 15. And it's about the students in terms of preparing them for work experience, in terms of the culture of work, the behaviours, and really the readiness of students for WIL, if you wouldn't mind, Norah. Thank you. And thanks, Mandy, for that question.
And what do we do about it? Is that what, the preparedness? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we have a very extensive unit called our Work Integrated Learning Programs unit, and they're responsible for the curriculum or the pedagogy to prepare students before each experience. We have a whole set of professional development courses that students have to take during their work experiences, and then there's programming that happens after. With respect to preparing, every student must successfully complete the first preparatory course, and these are for credit. And if they don't successfully complete it, they don't go out in their first work term. So that's how that works. And we have that across the board. So everybody has to do it. And within that, you've got the usual types of subjects, right? How understanding the nature of the world of work, understanding oneself and motivation, and then different techniques, because ours is a highly competitive process. So they have to do CVs and cover letters and all that shenanigans. And so it's getting ready for all of that so that they can do that. And that's the bare bones. Now, there are some students who that's more than enough, and off they go. And then there are other students where that's not necessarily enough. So for example, in our undergraduate population, about 20%, maybe a bit more now, are students who are international students. So appreciating the cultural values or the different cultural contexts of the Canadian workplace may be different from where they're from. So we have additional programming that's available, and that's offered as well to students. And sometimes that's required depending on where they're coming from and what their challenges are. And sometimes it's just an array of options that they can take. And that carries on all the way through until they get that first work term, and various interventions that escalate depending on where they're at.
Great. Listen, Norah, thanks very much. It's been fantastic learning about your experience in Canada. It's certainly given us all a lot of food for thought. And thanks to the rapporteurs for bringing through your questions. I'll hand you back to the MC now.